Hello, and welcome to our podcast,
Sisters, Not Wives.
I'm your host, Kinsley Hatch.
And I'm Jocelyn Hatch.
Okay, so, do you remember what we talked about last time?
Oh, it was the Slutty Mayor.
Yes!
I feel like somebody's going to make a song.
So it's going to make a song.
Why are you so surprised?
Huh?
I'm so surprised that I remember.
Well,
How
honestly,
could I forget that guy?
who could forget that guy?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I just remember you said it was like it sounded like a, what did you say?
Role play.
Yeah, I was like, oh no!
And I didn't put my these together in my head that you had made that up.
Oh,
I was
man.
like, I thought that was his official name.
No, I thought I was so clever.
It was.
It was
funny
but-
and clever.
But maybe not the right context. Anyway, so this one, I wanted to talk about what was happening in England, kind of while that was happening in Nauvoo.
Ooh,
We're going to talk about this.
the world.
Travel the world with us. Yes. And the secret inner circle
Okay.
that was practicing polygamy in the beginning.
Okay.
Yes. So, if you ever hear the telling of like the first vision and Joseph Smith, it always starts out with Joseph Smith being like, I don't know what religion to join. And sometimes they give the context of like, there was like a religious awakening in America at this time.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of like all the context we get for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of church history is that way, where you're seeing it in the funnel and the paradigm of church history, and they're just telling you like enough to get to the point of what they want to talk about,
Yeah.
which is fine. But I think that's why I like talking about it like this, because it gives it a more just holistic view of the influences that they were having at the time. Like, it's so easy just to view it from the perspective of like the gospel, but to realize that they were being influenced by the politics and the gossip and the rumors and the like other people were affecting them. I think sometimes with religion we take this like purist view that like nothing was affecting them and it was coming directly from God. And I think that's why some people have a hard time with church history, because that's just not really realistic to life.
No,
And so
it's not. Everything affects everything.
yes. And so if you look at people that way, it tends to lead towards a more whitewashing perspective. And it's not just of the church. Like, people have done that all throughout history about things
Right.
they want to keep good, is they don't want to acknowledge maybe some bad things that happened, or like that it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important. And a lot of that happened with polygamy too. So a lot of people obviously say like Joseph Smith started polygamy or Brigham Young started polygamy, and people have their different camps. But what if I told you that they actually found a group of people who were initially practicing polygamy, and that's what first influenced everyone?
Oh.
Yeah. So
I've heard this.
I know it's not something well known because there's not a lot of documentation of it, but there is, and it happened at the very beginning.
Mm.
And so, and also I think a lot of times, because a lot of people in the church believe that polygamy was revealed by God, it's hard, like, it doesn't sit well in that paradigm to consider that maybe they were influenced by outside things happening at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's actually super interesting because it was from a cult during that time in the 1830s. So there is this guy, his name is Jacob Cochran, and he was in Maine. I think it's called Saco, Maine. It's what?
I don't know. For some reason, I never thought about cults being that old, but honestly, it made sense. It's
I
been
know.
a forever long thing.
For real. Well,
Inner circles and secret groups and secret societies.
I know, it's kind of funny thinking of it back then. It's like, yeah, cults seem very like modern day, you know,
Yeah.
and like a charismatic. But with what was happening in America at then, there was all these religious movements going on at the time, because there was a religious awakening in America. So
Yeah.
not only were the main religious, but like a lot of little uproots were coming up. And I think that's what a lot of people thought Mormonism was going to be, was like a small little cult that would die out. And so Mormonism was way different because it actually turned into a religion. What?
It's kind of like a musician, or all the actors and actresses and the musicians. It's like, they're like,
No.
It's
What?
like-
What?
there's a bunch that are trying to be it,
Yes.
and then a lot of them just don't make it.
Yeah, it's like, can you make it? Do you get your big shot, you know? Yeah. It's
Do
actually
you
kind
go
of fascinating.
viral?
Yes. Well, and it's also, I guess this is a later topic, but it's also kind of fascinating because I feel like a lot of people who leave the church nowadays call Mormonism a cult.
Mm-hmm.
It is just interesting, like, what is the difference between a cult and a religion is an interesting question.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's this cult led by this guy in Maine, and he got a big following in New England, and he preached a lot of things that kind of eventually incorporated themselves into Mormonism. So he taught that his like ideology, he was restoring the like church of old from the like Jesus's apostles, which is what Mormonism believes, like we're a restored church from Jesus's time. He preached that too. They even had a ceremony that was similar to the temple with the Garden of Eden and things like that. They also had other things that like were not a part of Mormonism. They called the reaping, which was basically like just like freaking out. Like I think there's some religious sects that still do this, but it's like you're overcome by the spirit and you convulse and shake and freak out, you know, and like that's how you feel the spirit. So they had this whole ritual around that called the reaping, which sounds so culty, but so that was a part of it. And then another big part of their cult or religion or whatever you want to call it was they kind of had more of a free love, non-traditional marriage system. That was basically polygamy, where the prophet would decide who gets who, and multiple men could marry multiple women, and the prophet was the one who dictates who gets who, and it was just conveniently that he got half the women.
That's like a very common thing in cults.
It always happens in cult. It's like power and sex, like those they go hand in hand, and with cults, they're like charismatic leaders, and it just always happens. It's crazy that every time someone is being talked to by God, he always tells them that he needs to have sex with a bunch of women. Crazy. He's like, God just always wants that for some reason. I don't know why he's telling me, but he said so. So
yeah, it's like really messed up though, because it's such a form of control, and it's such like it's an intimate thing, and they use it to twist it, to make it manipulative, to make you feel more connected, to make you feel more believing in it, and more like you've given yourself to that person, that leader, or to whatever.
I think if you can control someone's sexuality, especially women, I feel like that's the age-old story of women. Like, women's sexuality has always been controlled, and that's just a really powerful way to control anyone.
Yeah.
And so it just makes sense, like in cults, that's always a part of it.
Yep.
And how in polygamy and cults, like, it also gets you young, you know, it starts controlling your sexuality from a young age. And so that was a big element of their beliefs. And it grew really big. It grew to like the thousands. There's thousands of people in New England and Boston and Maine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never heard of this.
Yeah.
I feel like his name sounds familiar, but I don't know if I've ever actually heard of that guy.
Really? I had never heard of him until I started digging into it. Like, even his name didn't sound familiar to me. But it was like in the 1820s and 1830, like barely 1830s. But then he got arrested for adultery and like lewd behavior, and so he went to jail. And then it kind of just like, there were still these communities, but like there's not really a lot of statistics of what happened, like how many people were left, but there were still these communities.
It's really interesting too when you think about that, because I'm like, dang, in the freaking 1820s, is that what you said when it starts? Like, you always think of like this kind of stuff, like culty stuff or like free love stuff happening in like the 70s, the 1970s. And it's like, no, dude, history repeats itself over and over again. Like, none of these ideas are new.
Exactly. That's why I love studying history, because I feel like as an experience as a human being, you go through the same thing. You're like, these are all new experiences to me, not realizing that other people have gone through these experiences and that there's like patterns and principles and things in life, you know?
Well, and then you even think about it biblically and it touch on the lives and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, it is. It's not a recent thing and it's not only an old thing. It's like ever present. But again, how they say you can learn from history, I think it's really when you learn about that stuff in history, it like connects the dots in different ways and it sheds new light on it. Cause yeah, like free love.
History is important.
Yes. Well, and it's so interesting. Like the 1950s and 1960s were so strict with sexuality and like male and female roles and all of that, that the 1970s was like a reaction almost like a counterbalance to all of that was happening. And I think, and that's why I think talking about polygamy in the church and what was happening is so interesting because we never hear about like sexual things, and it came from a very like pure time where, and like we'll get into the social norms of the time, but like you never hear about that stuff because it was all hush hush, but it doesn't mean it wasn't happening. And to talk about it happening, it's crazy how similar it is to today. So, but this guy, so their prophet went to prison, and then and it didn't really grow after that, but there were still these communities in New England, and the church, the Mormon Church, the LDS Church, was founded in 1830, and whatever reason, missionaries were sent to those places because they didn't have a leader anymore. And so it was like, let's go convert them. And so a lot of the early missionaries went to these places where these communities were, and they write about it. And it's really interesting. So like, there's usually like two camps of people who like look into this. The first camp of people are like this is where Joseph Smith got exposed to it, and he wanted to go convert those people because he was already dabbling in polygamy and was thinking about it. And then there's the other side of people who are like, no, like they went into these communities, and this is where Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball were first serving missions, people who became some of the biggest polygamists of the LDS Church and took the leadership over after Joseph Smith. This is where they actually were present, and they were seeing communities like this, and they were learning it, and it started brewing in their own heads, and maybe they even had experiences here. And so there's those two thoughts. And I honestly think both are true. I don't think you can say that Joseph Smith didn't know about those communities, because his brother, Samuel Smith, was one of the missionaries who went out there, and like all the people who would become the 12 apostles. So there's no way Joseph Smith didn't know about that. There's just not really any record of like what his attention was, you know. But Samuel Smith ends up marrying someone from one of those communities, Mary Bailey, his wife. They get married. But
interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I'm not sure if it's thousands because there's not a ton of data about how many Cochranrites actually converted to Mormonism. But a lot of these people in communities became Mormons. They were easily converted, and then they migrated to the Kirtland and like ingrained themselves in the Mormon community. So you have a lot of, I know. So you have a lot of people who are already exposed to a non-traditional marriage system.
Yeah.
Who became Mormons. So you have that influence.
So it's like, you take a little bit of us, and we take a little bit of you.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and that's
integrated.
Right. And that's the thing. Like we have I feel like our doctrines and our scriptures and our canonized parts of the religion of LDS seems so established now.
Yeah.
But back then it was all new. Like Joseph Smith was being persecuted for publishing the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And so we're like, LDS people are also familiar with it, but back then, like, no one knew if Mormonism was just going to fade like this cult had.
Right.
And so, like, it makes sense that they were intermingling and like changing and trying to figure out what they believed, you know? But it's just interesting that there's that influence. But I think it's a little deeper than that. Because some shady things, for me, this is where I think some of the people who became the biggest polygamists. So Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, Parley P. Pratt, all those people. I think that's where they had their first taste of it. And the interesting thing is, like, Samuel Smith, who was Joe Smith's brother, he married a woman from one of those communities, but they remained monogamous all their lives.
That's interesting.
Whereas Brigham Young eventually married someone from one of those communities, or in that area at least. Her name was Augusta Cobb. And it's a really interesting story because she was already married with children.
Was he already married?
Mm-hmm.
Just once.
Yeah, so
Who was his first wife?
When or who? So he married his first wife. I'm like blanking on her name right now, but he married his first wife and had 2 daughters with her, and then she died from like sickness. She was sick for a really long time and then died. And so he was a widow for a little bit, but then shortly met Mary Angle, who he married after.
Was he a part of the church yet or no?
Yeah. So he was a part of the church. He got married before he was a part of the church. And then
joined the church.
Him and
then she died.
They had 2 kids together. Him and her both got baptized. She got sick and died. He was a widow for a little bit. And then he kind of like went more into like joined the Mormons even more and just kind of got involved in that. But shortly soon married Mary Angle, who was also a Mormon. And that was considered his, like, obviously his first wife died, but this was his, like, first wife in terms of polygamy.
Interesting. Can you imagine being his kids? Being, like, his first 2 daughters and being, like, oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
I have, like, 1 million siblings.
It's crazy.
And just to be, like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
did they write anything? I'd be interested to hear from them.
Yeah, I don't really know a lot about what happened to his 2 older daughters, like his first 2 daughters from that first marriage. I know more about what happened to Mary Angle and her 5 kids that she had with him.
Okay.
Because she went to Utah with him. But
anyway, sorry, it's just random.
No, but that is it's just interesting to think of the realities of each of it and people in their own roles. It's like things
that you don't think about too.
Right.
Like in the church, you're like, oh yeah, the church did this and then they did this. It's like, yeah, but the people that you hear about quite often too. I never thought about who Brigham Young's first wife was.
Yes, I think that's the interesting thing. And you're just kind of like following the narrative, even in that children's book, and that's why I take problem with it. Like that children's book, even the imagery of it is like just having you follow the narrative and not thinking of, like, they're talking about polygamy without talking about polygamy. Like in the pictures, you don't see multiple wives, you only see their first wives.
And everybody's so upset.
Yeah, everyone's so upset about the idea of polygamy, but then they find happiness. It's just like the narrative never really leads you to think about the realities of everyone involved.
Right.
And then a lot of times, like, anti-Mormon literature or just other outside people are like talking about the sexual part of it, and then the church is like, don't make it like that, like it's not about sex. And it's like it probably wasn't all about sex, but it's a part of it, and it needs to be talked about because it still influences everything, like
that's the thing.
Connected.
If you're gonna talk about it, talk about it.
Right.
Talk about all the aspects. Don't try to sugarcoat other stuff. Don't try to glaze over certain, like, it is what it is.
And I think that's kind of the hilarious part about religion when it comes to, like, because a big part of polygamy was raising up seed to the Lord.
Right.
Which I think it's so funny how religion all the time wants to talk about having children without talking about sex. When they go hand in hand together. Yeah. And they're not enemies and they're not opposites. They're like coexisting.
Right.
And so I feel like with polygamy in particular, it's like always talking about it indirectly and skirting around the uncomfortable things. And that's why we're talking about this.
Yep. It's just funny too, because it's like, obviously people know what that entails. So what, like, who are you, I don't know, protecting, I guess, from that conversation? Yourselves because you're uncomfortable? Or like, I don't know. It's just interesting.
It is super interesting, but it has always been a part of the Mormon or the polygamy dialogue, is that kind of like wanting to address it, but not fully wanting to address it because it's uncomfortable or for whatever reason. It's just like a huge part of it, but it's important to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to Brigham Young, so some things that I think, like, Oliver Cowdery went to it, and he writes about, like, seeing the Cochranrites and seeing them kind of live this free lifestyle, and he's like, this is disgusting. He's, like, not about it. But a lot of people...
Wait, who did that?
Oliver Cowdery. He was one of the missionaries who went there. But an interesting thing is Brigham Young requested to go on a mission to New England without a companion, by himself. And it's like...
Okay, bro.
I know. It's like, why would you want to go to
He's like, I'm going to go find me my own companion.
I know. I don't need to be assigned a companion.
And you know what? I'm going to find me a group of companions.
For real. But it's just interesting. It's like, why would you need to go by yourself to these communities? Right. So that's kind of sketchy. And Brigham...
no competition.
Yeah, for real. But... And Brigham Young went back and forth on missions and just to visit New England and Boston throughout the 1830s and 1840s. Mm-hmm. And that's how he came into contact with this woman, Augusta Cobb. And a lot of these things we're talking about, there's fragmentary evidence on both sides. There's fragmentary evidence, pretty much all the evidence saying that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy is based on fragments. But a lot of the, like, theories and things that maybe I believe or like things I have found, there's also fragments. Yeah. But there are some things that are facts that are like well proven. Mm-hmm. And one of the facts is that Brigham Young definitely got with this woman while she was married, while she already had kids, and she definitely abandoned her family and took her two youngest kids, who suspiciously she just had a baby, and named him Brigham.
Oh my gosh.
And then she left her family and because she was married to a non-Mormon husband who she did not love, and took off and eloped with Brigham, and they went back to Nauvoo. She took two of her like the baby and the next youngest, who sadly both died on the way to Nauvoo. Yeah. So they both died. But she abandoned her family and then got sealed to Brigham in Nauvoo. Before she was ever divorced from her husband's name was Henry Cobb. So Henry Cobb sued her for adultery with Brigham Young and won and was granted a divorce.
What?
That is an indisputable fact.
What?
Like some of these other things I'm going to say about Brigham, some of it like fragments, just as much fragments as Joseph Smith. But this is like a legal case that is in the records. We know she did this, and we know, like, they got married after, and she writes a lot.
And they were a part of these communities.
Augusta was, yeah.
But dude was not okay with her giving free love and running off with.
Well, they were in the same area, so it's never confirmed how involved she was in this community.
Okay.
But they came in contact during this time.
Obviously, he wasn't if he sued her for divorce.
Yeah. He was like a non-Mormon wealthy businessman. Mm. And they had a family. I think she had like 7 kids, including the 2 youngest.
Was the youngest baby Brigham Young's?
That's what it's speculated. It's speculated that they had a sexual affair a year before. If he
wasn't though, too, if it was the other guys, and then she named him
just
Brigham.
Stole the baby. Yeah,
and she named him Brigham.
Yeah,
I'm hung up on that part.
Like, oh my gosh, you named a baby after the guy who you cheated on me with?
That's like a thing that people do. It's really gross.
That is disgusting.
Who else did that? Sorry, I have to think about this.
I don't know who else did it.
Oh, Adam Levine talked about naming one of his daughters after a girl, but he was...
Oh my god.
Yeah, it was a huge thing.
Wow.
Anyway, modern day world.
Yeah, no,
Back to this guy.
Crazy. Yeah, so either she named her baby after the guy she eventually left her husband for and like eloped without divorcing, so adultery, or it was Brigham's baby and they had a sexual affair while she was still married.
Also, I feel like back then, maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is perception, but back then it was very much like, oh my gosh, well, they probably had so many terrible things happen to them that it wasn't like superstitious, like, oh my gosh, this terrible thing happened to me. The Lord is punishing me. Because I feel like
I feel like that was probably still very much a part of their time.
Probably. They were probably picking and choosing, though. Because I feel like if both your kids died on the way over, you'd be like, oh, shoot, what should I do?
Yeah, I think it's
I don't
hard
know.
because they
already had so much going on.
Yeah, and kids died more often back then. But at the same time, you think they would be like, like maybe this was a sign. But Augusta writes some things later in life that is super interesting about Brigham Young.
Oh, I can't.
And she's not happy.
Oh, I can't.
But yeah. But honestly, a lot of it feels like she just didn't love her husband. And I want to talk about that. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but like why these women entered polygamy. And
yeah, for real.
Because it seems like the worst idea in the world for these women, right?
Right.
And what happened?
How'd they sell them on this?
Yeah, and okay, this is what I think. So back then, and this relates to England and America. So in this era, it's Victorian era in England because Queen Victoria is ruling. So in Victorian England and in America at this time, the ideology that governed the idea of gender and men and women and roles was the separate sphere ideology, which basically it's kind of the basis of what we think of misogyny nowadays, but it was just the prevalent thought at the time. It was thought that men and women belong in separate spheres. Men belong in the public sphere, in politics, in business, in law, in like paid work. And that's their job. And women belong in the private sphere, at home, in communities, raising children, and like the things that women are can be praised for is like piousness and domesticity and submissiveness and like virtue. And it was kind of taught that it was taught that that was like good for women. Like you were protecting women by keeping them in the private sphere. And I think that was kind of a natural evolution of the world. Like if you think about it, like they were like, we're protecting women by keeping them in houses because the harsh realities, like women died from like children out in the wilderness, like giving birth in the wilderness, and like all these things were happening to people. So now we've created these great homes for them to live in, and they're safe here. And they're the weaker of the sexes, so we're protecting them, and the men is protecting them. And so that's like the positive way that they viewed it. But obviously that's like the underlying misogyny that we see misogyny now is all based in that. But that was just like how people thought. And women were seen as like had no sexual desires. Like women, it was just thought they did not have sexual desires and they were only pleasing their husband when they had sex, but they were just like pure vessels and like less susceptible to perversion. Whereas men were sexual, did have sexual needs and needed that fulfilled, but they were easier to corrupt. And so it was like they prided women and taught women, like the less you know about sex and the less you know about your own sexuality, about your own bodies, even giving birth, like the better. Because you're pure and that's like dirty things that men do. And so I think that's why polygamy hit with some people and with some women. I think in Utah it became different, like there became different reasons, but I think at the beginning they were allowed to experiment with sexuality in a way that they couldn't before. Like Augusta talks about how she was in an unhappy marriage, and a lot of women who were in marriages who left them to join like Mormon polygamists talk about not being happy in their own marriages. So and they couldn't really divorce back then. They didn't have a lot of power in the public sphere. And so this was a way for them to jump on board with a man where they could have that power and then get out of a situation they didn't want to be in but had no control over.
It was always like an escape.
Yeah, so I think that was a part of it.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking there probably are a bunch of different reasons, honestly.
Yeah, there are.
I think I've jokingly made the comment to my friend when we were like making dinner together. I was like, I understand why people are polygamous, why they have sister wives. Like, it's so much easier to do stuff when you have multiple people.
And I think that was a part of it too. Like, at the beginning.
Hard.
It is hard, especially back then. There was no dishwashers back then, you know? They, like, women had to do everything with the household. And so I think the idea of having a helpmate who would help you with the chores and help you with your, like, womanly experience, someone who could be in the home with you since your husband wasn't, and could take care of the children and could cook with you and like, share the burden. And also, I think in marriage, eventually, sexual, like, I think some women didn't want to be their only sexual outlet for their husband, you know? Like, that was a toll on them, too.
Like it.
Yeah, like, if these women were never taught about their own sexuality.
Modern day, too. If you're not taught about your sexuality, you don't have the freedom to explore that.
Yeah, you just don't like it.
You just don't even know. You don't even know what's going on. And you're with somebody who probably doesn't know either. And that's a whole other thing.
That is, but I think that played a lot in polygamy too. I think, like, let's share the sexual responsibility in a way so my husband can be appeased and get, like, the duty that's obliged to him and he can be satisfied, but it doesn't always have to be me. I think with more women who are more asexual, or not even asexual, but just didn't know and so didn't know how to enjoy it, and were not in tune with sexuality. Is probably very traumatizing if you don't know that, you know.
For real.
Most people who don't know about their own sexuality who have sex, it's traumatizing. And so I think for them, like, getting able to push that away to someone else was actually a relief. And then on the flip side, you have people who probably were experimenting with their sexuality at the beginning. So that's what was happening in England. So Augusta, that whole thing happened in 1843, I think.
Okay.
But
when did they start sending missionaries out?
In the early 1830s. So the church was, like, the Book of Mormon was written
pretty quickly.
Yeah. The Book of Mormon was written and the church was established in April 1830, and then they sent out missionaries. So that's when they went to New England and Boston and Maine and all those places. It's just interesting because there's a lot more connections with the people who became the 12 apostles to those areas. Like, there was a special conference held in Maine where those communities were in, like, 1835, and, like, 8 of the 12 apostles were there. Joseph Smith never went, but all these people who became the apostles kept going back to those areas. And Brigham Young kept going back, and that's how he became involved with this woman in the 1840s. But, so missionary work was a big deal kind of from the beginning for Mormonism. And then in 1839, that's when Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball and all of them went to England. And the interesting thing is there's only 10 apostles at the time because 2 spots were just vacant. So there's only 10 apostles at the time, but 8 of the 10 apostles served missions in England together. And out of the 10 apostles of that time, those 8 all became polygamists. And the 2 who did not serve in England were William Smith, who is Joseph Smith's brother, and then John E. Page, who also never became a polygamist. But the interesting thing is the, like, official narrative has tried to claim that John Page was a polygamist.
Oh.
But it's interesting. John Page, he, like Joseph F. Smith, who obviously became the prophet later on and was a big proponent of polygamy, he tried to claim that Johnny Page was a polygamist, but the evidence he uses is really interesting, because what happened after Joseph Smith died is Johnny Page left the church. He didn't agree with Brigham Young and joined other groups that were, like, anti-Brigham Young, anti all the doctrines they were bringing on, and anti-polygamy. And then and then Johnny Page eventually came to his own conclusion after a while after that Joseph Smith had become a fallen prophet because of what had happened to him in Missouri. He surrounded himself with corrupt, like, bad men to try to protect himself. So that's what Johnny Page eventually came to believe, and he left the church. But it's interesting because the evidence that they try to use to prove that Johnny Page did practice polygamy, Joseph F. Smith went to his wife, Mary Judd, in 1904, which was
whose wife?
Johnny Page's wife. So she's like very old. He had died 37 years before this, and he went and asked her, and he does a little interview with her, and he said, "Did Johnny Page have wives other than you?" She replied, "Yes." I said, Joseph Smith, F. Smith talking, "How did he get them?" She said, "I gave them to him." I said, "How come you did that?" She said, "Well, he wanted them and I gave them to him." Probably one of those people who were like, "Please." But
Get him away from me.
I know, I'm sick of this. And then Joseph F. Smith says, "Well, that was in the days of the prophet Joseph Smith." And she said, "Yes, it was." So a couple of problems with this. So that's what they used to say Johnny Page did practice polygamy. And in fact, like Joseph Smith condoned it. But this is in contradiction to like the contemporary evidence we had that Johnny Page was always against polygamy. And then on top of that,
like got dementia. Like,
yeah, it's 1904, and in 1891, when she was like
plus,
over,
did he record this conversation? Is this just what he's saying? She said.
I think it was pretty much like known that was like legit. He didn't make that up, but the thing is, she testified in the Temple Lot case, which we'll get into someday. But it happened in 1891, and it dealt with polygamy a lot. And she testified in this case that she had never heard of the doctrine or practice of plural wives or polygamy in Joseph Smith's lifetime. So either she was lying then or she's lying before that.
Right.
And so, like, it's not the best testimony, and it doesn't go along with the contemporary evidence we have. So the real question is, like, why would Joseph F. Smith want to make it look like Johnny Page was practicing polygamy when he wasn't?
I bet you're gonna tell me.
I think it's because they were trying to not pinpoint so much the secret inner circle that was practicing polygamy, and which was every single apostle in England serving missions. He wasn't, and so I think they were trying to spread it out and make it look as much as possible that it was coming from Joseph Smith and that other people were doing it. But what was happening in England is crazy. So here's another thing that is an undisputed fact that no one says, I don't know if that was true, because it was written down by Brigham Young and it's like pretty ascertained it's there. So it is an undisputed fact that Brigham Young claimed that he had a revelation from God about polygamy while he was serving in England before Joseph Smith ever told him about polygamy. So how the official narrative goes is Joseph Smith was practicing polygamy, like we talked about how he first dabbled in it in the 1830s with Fanny Alger, and then stopped because that was a bad experience. And then in Nauvoo, he started up again. And then these people left to England right when the Missouri stuff was happening. Mm-hmm. And so they get back, and the church is now established in Nauvoo. And then right away when they get back, Joseph Smith tells them about polygamy because he's been practicing it this whole time, and then they start getting involved in it. So that's the official narrative. So it's super interesting that Brigham Young says that he had a revelation from God while he was in England, separate from Joseph Smith, that told him about polygamy. And he says he kept it to himself. He didn't tell a single soul about the revelation, and he didn't quite understand it at this time. But then he talks about when Joseph Smith first tells him when he gets home from Nauvoo, he's like, oh, I get it. I understand it. And Joseph Smith is kind of surprised, and he's like, God has opened up your eyes. And Brigham Young's like, yeah, because I had a revelation about this when I was in England. So that's super. So he says, we know for a fact that Brigham Young claimed that he had a revelation independent of Joseph Smith before Joseph Smith told him while he was in England. And then there's some interesting things that people say Brigham Young was doing in England. This man, Thomas Stafford, was a member of the 70 at the time, claimed that Brigham Young was committing adultery, and he witnessed it when he was in Manchester. So he says, I'm just going to read it because it's kind of interesting. He says, I am fully convinced. He wrote this in an affidavit in 1891. Oh, no, sorry, it was to a letter. But he said, I am fully convinced, as I was then, that Brigham Young was in adultery in Manchester, England, in the fall, winter, and spring of 1840 and 1841. Elizabeth Mayer is the person with whom Brigham was then committing adultery. My reasons are these. We lived next door to her under the same roof. This Elizabeth Mayer had a father and a brother who were gardeners. They took their dinners as they worked a long piece from home. After they left for work, Brigham would step into the house. She would then lock the door and pull down the blinds and curtains, which to me was strange. He never came to see our folks, although not 5 steps apart, and when he left, he was always in a hurry, and she never came to the door with him when he was leaving.
Oh.
So that's kind of crazy. Someone's just straight up accusing Brigham Young of committing adultery when he was a missionary in England.
Yeah.
I will say, though, this source is from 1891, so it's not contemporary.
Right.
So that is just one person saying that. So it could just be passed off as rumors. But there's more evidence. So Brigham Young was there.
It's so funny. I don't know why it's funny, but it is.
Yeah.
I just feel like there would not be a whole lot to be doing during this time, like for funsies. And so
what else
like,
are they gonna do?
that guy, he's over here.
I know, they're like so bored. They're like, my life's... What is Brigham
there? He's here again.
I know. They're like,
They're just so nosy. I feel like people were... Maybe not. But it seems like they were extra nosy because that's like...
What else are you going to do but watch people, you know, figure out their... And I think also in such a time where it was strict, like back then it was like...
That was like some tea.
Yeah, in Victorian England, it was like men and women were to have no physical contact, even in courtship until they were married, like they could shake hands, and that was that. So the fact that he's going into her house alone, and they're closing the door, you know, they're just like...
he never came over here?
Yeah, I know! They're like, never visited us! And just the social norms are... completely different and so strict, so the fact that it was happening, it makes it even more noticeable. So Brigham Young was there. The people who were there was Brigham Young. I'm just gonna say everyone because it's so his best friend Heberson Kimball was his best friend from the get-go. So he's there.
BFFs.
They like went to England together, they traveled together. And then Wilford Woodruff, and then Brigham's cousin Willard Richards, John Taylor, and then like the Pratts, Orson Hyde, those people. And then they also converted a guy named William Clayton, which I'm going to get into because it's hilarious. But basically, they're just having the best bro time of their life in England. Like, they're away from all the other leaders and they're interacting with each other a lot. And it's just interesting that you have Brigham Young, who was the second prophet, John Taylor, who was the third, Wilford Woodruff, who was the fourth, and all these other people who became super influential. And so they're all...
we gotta go leave our families and do our thing.
Yeah, all of them are married. All of them are married and have kids pretty much at this time.
Right.
But they're away serving, and they're like having their hot boy summer. Like, they're all with their best friends, and they're getting closer and bonding and having these like shared trials and these shared experiences together. Because let's be honest, missionary work is not easy. And especially back then when like Mormonism was new, they went through hard things too.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting because you have this alleged account of Brigham Young committing adultery when he's in Manchester. Like, the source is not definite, so we don't know if that's actually happened, but there is that rumor. But we do have Heber C. Kimball talking about there's this weird thing that starts happening about, like, washing feet, where these missionaries go into the homes of these single women and they do a washing of the feet ritual.
Somebody had a foot fetish.
Yeah, and then they go to bed after. So
what do you mean they go to bed?
That's what the journals say. We don't know what that means. Doesn't mean they were sleeping
they were
together.
So
They just went to.
It really
I know.
Irritates me.
I know.
Like, we did this.
I know.
You decide what that means.
I know. But it's just interesting because it's a pattern. Like, there's accounts of Heber C. Kimball doing it. Like, multiple people start doing it. William Clayton starts doing it. And so it's like, it has to be something that they were talking about and all doing. Maybe someone like Brigham Young had the revelation or something. But foot washing was happening before this. Like, the Cochranites had that in their community. But that is kind of a fairly common, like, Christian thing that people do.
Right. Well, they talk about Christ washing his
it originates from Christ.
feet.
Yeah, it originates from the Bible. And so a bunch of different Christianity sects like have their own things that they do for that. But it's interesting because foot washing did incorporate itself into the temple with the second anointing too. But in this context, it's not happening in a temple. It's not happening in like any ordinance. It's happening with a missionary and a single woman in a house alone together, washing each other's feet in a time where physical contact was a no-no.
Very erotic.
Yeah, it is.
And it's so much like they were probably using the Jesus thing to like use it as an excuse. And women probably didn't have somebody rub their feet ever for like, heck yeah.
That's what it really was. They're like, I haven't had a massage in my whole life.
They're like, this is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, like, I think that's another reason that got women is they were able to religiously, like they were socially programmed all their lives to think sex is bad and sexuality is bad. And then you have these men being like, no, God said it's okay. And so they're like having these like sexual or romantic experiences for the first time. And they're being given an out to avoid the shame that's been put on their conscience from society all their lives.
You're right.
Well, it seems very tempting to me, you know, if I was in that situation. It's like,
yeah. Well, and I just think
sense.
like religious too, like religious, it's all spiritual, it's all emotional, it's all like that would be so easy to just get wrapped up that way.
For sure. So it's just interesting that it's a pattern. It's not one of them doing it. It's a couple of them doing it. And it's all happening in England.
Yeah.
So interesting. So there's like multiple accounts from people's journals of that. And then William Clayton, I freaking love this guy because what you were saying about things being vague, he is leaving nothing vague in his journals.
Love this guy.
It literally gives like Michael Scott vibes in The Office where they like take his journal for Jan's disposition and he's like, tan almost everywhere. Jan almost everywhere. I just had the best week of my life. Hee hee. Oh, diary. Like that level of like Michael Scott energy is in William Clayton's diary.
Please tell me you're gonna read some.
We'll see if I have. I don't. Okay, so he just talks. You could tell he is having a heyday because his wife's back in like Manchester, I think, with his kids, and he's just hanging out with all these women, and he talks about them and he names them. And he's just like, hung out with Sarah today. It was so fun. We walked around. She gave me an orange. And then, like, he documents every single gift he gets from every single woman. He's like, this girl gave me some raisins today. Like, he talks about that so much. And then he's like, these girls are fighting. But there's a lot of that. Like, people are fighting each other. And it's like, I wonder what these women were fighting about. It's kind of like, I wonder if they were getting upset because he was hanging around multiple of, you know, like, was there some romantic love triangle dramas going on?
And he's like, I don't know what's happening.
Anyway, so yeah, William Clayton is like spilling all the tea. He's like, dear diary, you'll never believe what happened today. And he's just talking about how he's hanging out. Okay, and weird things like this woman had a dream that my wife died and I was stuck with the child. And like they're talking about dreams with each other, which is
very impressionable.
Yes, he is. And he's talking about like she had a dream that her hair was down and it was flowing down the back of her back and blah, blah, blah. Just like all these interesting weirdo dreams, like definitely like intimate conversations he's having with these women, and they're all giving him little food gifts, which he's all about. And there's so many oranges he gets. He's like, Sarah gave me another orange. And then, like, why would you need to say that in your journal? But he feels like he has to. And
he's got that orange count.
I know. Honestly, like, and he's hanging out with all these women and he like barely mentions his wife. And sometimes he'll like, when he does go to visit his wife, he's like, saw my wife. Back to Rachel, you know, like, like it's kind of crazy what he says in his journal. And so he just like goes on about that. Name? William Clayton.
Okay.
And he becomes an important character because he eventually moves to Nauvoo and he becomes the scribe for Joseph Smith.
Oh, I bet he was scribing.
I know.
He's scribing everything. That's hilarious.
I know. Well, it's kind of crazy, though, because also in his journal, there's tons of sections that are scribbled out and blacked out. So I don't know if it was him or someone else.
He invented the blackout marker.
Yeah. What's that called? The whiteout? Yeah. Yeah. But there's like some erased sections that we can still read. And then there's a lot of his journal that's blacked out that someone, whether it was him or someone else, went back and was like, people cannot know about this. But it's like,
what? I was running his mouth.
I know. But it's like, why? Like, what was he saying that there's so many blackout sections in a journal? Right. But it's also interesting because we'll talk about this later, but he comes into question about what he's actually writing in Joseph Smith's journal. And it seems like more of he's like fabricating what he leaves tons of pages empty to fill in later, and he records contradictory things. And so a lot of people who are like pro Joseph Smith and like against Brigham Young practicing polygamy, starting polygamy, they think that William Clayton, and there's accounts of it that we'll get into, but like Brigham Young, William Clayton, Willard Richards, which is Brigham Young's cousin, all started changing the narrative and crafting these stories and these journals and fabricating them essentially. So, but that's not here. So we just know about his journal. And William Clayton talks about this one woman in particular, Sarah Crooks, who he spends a ton of time with. And he talks about how one time she decides that, okay, I'll just read it. So it's from his entry of February 27th, 1840. He says, Sarah Crooks appeared rather tempted to get married. I felt to sorrow on this account. I don't want Sarah to be married. I was much tempted on her account and felt to pray that the Lord would preserve me from impure affections. She gave me an orange.
Of course she did.
It's like in the middle. He just asked. Tell us that.
Oh, by the way. No. Give me an orange.
Yeah. I certainly feel my love towards her to increase, but shall strive against it. Keep in mind he's married. I feel too much to covet her and afraid lest her troubles should cause her to get married. The Lord keep me pure and preserve me from doing wrong. So he writes this in his journal about one of the women he's been spending a lot of time with. And it's clear that there's sexual attraction and romantic love between the two of them. To how far that went while he was there, we don't quite know. But we know he had these feelings. Right. He literally documented them. Which also makes me wonder what was blacked out if that was left. Right. You know? It's like, what was actually blacked out? The fact that him like admitting his love for another woman who as a missionary he converted while he's already married. So what's interesting though is that was in February of 1840, and then they get home from Nauvoo, and William Clayton claims that he wasn't told about polygamy from Joseph Smith until he was back in Nauvoo in 1843. And so he writes about when Joseph Smith told him about polygamy, and he signs an affidavit in 1874. He says, and he like tells this whole story, how he went walking with Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith's like, I heard you were really attached to this woman in England, referring to Sarah Crooks. And William Clayton is like, yeah, we were really attached, but no more than brother and sister. And then Joseph Smith's like, well, I just want you to let you know that you're entitled to as many women as you want, and that you should call for her and she should come from England and be your wife. And he was like, oh, well, I don't really have the means to bring her over. And he's like, that's okay, I'll help you, I'll take care of it. So from William Clayton's witness, decades later, he's like, actually, I only thought of her as my sister, and Joseph Smith was the one who suggested I marry her when he was teaching me about polygamy.
Your journal says otherwise, buddy.
He like forgot about what he was writing back then. I really feel like he was just hyped up and could not wait to get home to write in his journal all the fun things that happened to him that day. And so he forgot about that. And so that's interesting because he's clearly lying in one of those scenarios.
Right.
And obviously the contemporary one where he's admitting he has feelings and covets a woman when he's already married is definitely the more reliable source.
Right.
But it's just
probably the one he thought nobody was going to read.
Yeah, and how he changes it all later when things are to be what the rest of the narrative needs
and also
to be.
I'm just thinking logically, like, why would somebody be like, oh, don't worry, I'll help you get this girl. Like
that's the
I
crazy
don't know.
thing.
I mean, I guess if you were really trying to be a bro's bro or whatever the heck, like,
yeah.
I don't see some. I don't.
Yeah, why would Joseph Smith go out of his way when he was trying to keep polygamy a secret to bring someone over from England for him to marry?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing. That's the sad thing I feel about the official narrative. It paints Joseph Smith in such a bad light. It paints him as a liar, as someone who would go behind his wife's back and lie to her face after she had gone through hell for him, and a hypocrite telling everyone in public he's not doing these things when he is secretly doing these things. Like,
it is kind of interesting. It's like, this is your first prophet. You're like, it's very weird.
It's weird.
I don't know, like, how to vocalize that, because it's like, you're trying to make him look good, but you're just being vague about it because you think that'll make it look better, but then you're, I don't know.
It's true. It's like the only thing they have to make him look good, if they're basing their narrative off of Brigham Young and William Clayton and he, like, all these polygamists, the only thing they have that will make Joseph Smith look good is saying, oh, well, God told him to do it, so it's okay. That's like literally their only justification. And then they try to say, oh, but it wasn't about sex. And it, like, that's how they try to make Joseph Smith look good. But they're still claiming that he was lying and he was a hypocrite and he was doing, and he still was having sexual partners besides Emma Smith. They're claiming all these things are true.
Right.
And it's like extreme cognitive dissonance if you do believe that. Like, how on earth can you believe that and feel morally good about that?
Right.
And
weird.
It is so weird. And it's weird that they hold on to that narrative that's clearly, like, not based in the strongest evidence we have and is not based in morality, honestly. But it's all to protect these polygamists, which they don't need to protect. I feel like for some reason they feel like they have to defend Brigham Young and John Taylor Wolfe, like all these people, because it became the line of the prophets. And so if they lose that, how can they claim that their church is the right church? But
then it's interesting because then they kind of throw Joseph Smith under the bus in a way, and that's the original prophet that, like, had the revelations and restored the church, right?
Right, like all the major things we have about the religion, like, with the Book of Mormon.
I don't understand why it's so hard to admit that at one point. I guess because it was the restored church. And so to say that some prophets were corrupt or whatever would be to say that it was taken away again.
Yeah, and who's to say they have it back?
It's like,
you know,
the patriarchy, or not the patriarchy, the priesthood.
Yeah, it's like what do they say? It's like the unbroken line of priesthood or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't think they have to.
I don't think
that.
so either. Like, other people have the priesthood.
Yeah.
And just because the head.
Yeah, like you have all the keys.
Like, I don't know.
But you can still believe in all the keys. You can still believe in all the ordinances. You can still believe in everything in the church without having to accept that.
Yeah.
You know? And I think it would do them a greater service to just call a spade and not try to justify these icky things.
Yeah.
And
I'm very interested, though, because it sounds like they are kind of being like, how do we talk about this?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, that's why I think the survey is so interesting, because they've defended it for so long. And then the fact that they're even asking in a survey, like, do you think Joseph Smith started polygamy or do you think Brigham Young did? It means it's at least on their radar and they're trying to figure out how to handle it. So I am super interested to see what happens.
Me too.
I hope good comes from it, honestly. And I think the more we talk about it, the more good things will come from it. I would also love to see Section 132 taken out of the Doctrine and Covenants, because that is the revelation on polygamy. It's wild. And we still study it now. Like, it's in our Come Follow Me for this year. So I think there are changes that they can make without, like, giving up what maybe they're afraid they'll have to give up. But... So
I have kind of an ignorant question as somebody who hasn't read the Book of Mormon or Doctrine and Covenants and all that in a long time.
Yeah.
How far into church history does Doctrine and Covenants go?
It pretty much has to do all with Joseph Smith in Joseph Smith's lifetime.
And then, like, kind of as they leave, right? Or, like...
Yeah, it
doesn't do a whole lot with once they get to Utah.
Nope. You have Section 132, which, according to the narrative, Joseph Smith revealed in July of 1843, but it wasn't revealed to anyone in the church till 1852 when Brigham Young revealed it. And then that got canonized and replaced Section 101, which is Joseph Smith's original statement on marriage, which was monogamous.
Interesting.
So that was put into Doctrine and Covenants, I think, in the 1870s. And then you have the proclamation of Wilford Woodruff getting rid of polygamy. And that's kind of how D&C ends.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, so it is super interesting. But so all of this...
I'll actually read along this year.
Honestly, it's really fascinating once you get the full picture.
Yeah.
All of this, so I just think it's too coincidental that all these people, all these missionaries and 12 apostles who were best friends were in England and then came home in Nauvoo, and that's when polygamy really took off.
Yeah.
And how Joseph Smith, I want to go into what happens after they get home next time. And this, because it is undisputed that there was a secret inner circle of polygamous people in Nauvoo. It's just, who was it? So that's what we're going to talk about next time.